Obviously, I'm a huge Warriors fan, and that's never going to change. But one team that I've always had an affinity with is the Sacramento Kings. Sacramento Kings are a sad franchise. They're a team that has very loyal fans, fans that have been dedicated to this team ever since the Kings moved to Sacramento in 1985, and fans that have witnessed a lot of suffering and really taken abuse from the ownership and the front office. A team that currently has a 16-year playoff drought, hasn't seen the postseason since 2006, and they've gone through, 12 head coaches since then, and so since 2006. And so, that is something that I sort of stand with. As an A's fan in baseball, I sort of see the parallels. And obviously, I'm a Warriors fan, and Warriors fans have, we're very lucky to have good teams throughout the years in recent years. But the Kings have been sort of on the wrong side of basketball history. They've been in Sacramento, like I said, over 35 years at this point. 1985, they moved. No championships. They had playoff glory in the early 2000s with the likes of Mike Bibby, Peja Stojakovic, Vlade Divac, and many others. Jason Williams, this is Jason Williams' jersey. They had a lot of guys that were very, very capable of taking Sacramento to an NBA championship. And for the record, we all know the Kings technically do have one championship, but it was won in 1951 when they were known as the Rochester Royals. And so a lot of people don't count that, and I sort of agree. That was a very long time ago. It's not the Sacramento Kings. So on that note, I think I sort of want to just talk about why is this the case? The Kings have the potential. They have an owner with a lot of money. Vivek Ranadive purchased the team recently, and at first I sort of thought this guy has a good outlook. This guy has a good way of sort of seeing things, but I think my mind has changed on that. I thought maybe the competence would be there, but I think the thing is with the Kings is they're sort of always going to be the stepchild in California as a basketball team. They're sort of looked down on, and I feel bad for them. And so, yeah, I think the obvious thing I have to say is the Kings are horrible at drafting. I think that's just one thing that, if you had to sum up the Kings' woes and their troubles over the years, it's been drafting. But that's not the only thing. I think also, there's been trouble with attendance earlier on. I don't think it's as much of a problem. The Kings were, set to move to Seattle and Anaheim at different times, and I'm really happy they stayed in Sacramento. But that's sort of off topic. Let's talk about their draft picks. I know that's just the biggest thing that I want to touch on. The Kings have passed up on many future superstars. To name a few, Zach LaVine, even Stephen Curry, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell was one of them, Klay Thompson even, and Luka Doncic. I mean, these are all the guys I mentioned have the possibility of being future Hall of Famers. Some of them are NBA champs. And it's unfortunate for the Kings. And, I think one counter argument to the drafting thing is, oh, well, the Kings, they wouldn't have known that these guys would pan out. But when it happens 6 or 7 times, I think you start to think it's the general manager, it's the front office's fault. And you look at the guys they pick instead of, these guys. Marvin Bagley, a guy that had a lot of potential, a guy that, unfortunately, his career has sort of been ruined by injuries, and he had incredible potential. His size, Marvin Bagley, 6'11", right, power forward. But, he just really didn't get along with the team. Then you look at, them taking Thomas Robinson over Damian Lillard, and I'm not going to go over every single one. I mean, Tyreek Evans was picked. Ben McLemore was picked over Giannis. I'm not going to go over every one, but it's sort of the similar story. They pick a guy that has incredible college potential, but there has to be something wrong, right? I mean, this problem, I think, is the fact that the Kings have sort of been in a rebuild for 16 years, but they haven't rebuilt the right way. The Kings' sort of outlook on things is, if we can get a top 10 pick, we're going to get a star. And the fact of the matter is, that's just not true at all. I mean, the fact of the matter is, in the top 10 picks in the draft, if we're being honest, probably most of them will be superstars, but not all of them. And the problem with the Kings is they tank, in the regular season, but they don't tank good enough. They tank to maybe get the 5th pick, maybe the 3rd pick. I mean, this year, obviously they got Keegan Murray, and I'm not going to talk about the recent guys because I actually think the recent picks are pretty good. De'Aaron Fox has been a pretty good pick. I think Davion Mitchell's a good player. And, Keegan Murray this year, he hasn't played yet, obviously, but in the summer league, he's looked good. And so I'm not going to fault them on that. And I mean, I think their trades are also kind of questionable sometimes. I think this year with the Tyrese Halliburton trade, it, at first I didn't like it, but then I also thought the Kings' problem is that they can never get a big man. I think also another problem with the Kings is they sort of try to replicate what other teams do. I think Vivek Ranadive is very much inspired by the Warriors. He goes to Warriors games and sits courtside there. I think that's proof. And I think one formula the Warriors had was, we'll play small ball basketball, but we'll shoot threes. And I think the problem with the Kings is they draft guys that don't really, they'll draft guards that are like smaller and they're not necessarily that good at threes. And so as a result, they're getting outmatched on the floor. I don't blame De'Aaron Fox for that. I think De'Aaron Fox is incredible when he's healthy and when he has a supporting cast that can support him well. And I think the thing with Tyrese Halliburton before he got traded was the spacing on the floor wasn't there. And you have, not only De'Aaron Fox, you have Halliburton in the starting lineup, and then you have these other guards off the bench, and it's like, where's the big man? That's why I think in the long run, the Domantas Sabonis, if they can keep him, and maybe, who knows, maybe they make the play-in, maybe they make the playoffs. That was a good trade in the long run, I think. But I think other trades by the Kings have been really questionable in recent memory. And I think the problem is, it's just sometimes people just don't care about the Kings. Not sometimes. I think it's just a lot of turmoil. And I don't know. I think it's a lot of it's on the ownership, and a lot of it's just on poor decisions that the organization has made. And it's a shame because, Sacramento Kings, like I said, early 2000s, they were so good. They were winning the Pacific Division in multiple years. And yet now it sort of seems like the ownership doesn't really care about how good they do. Basketball, you have to be competitive. We have a salary cap that is pretty high. And usually in basketball, you can get a superstar, pretty easily. Each team is going to get a superstar. And I think De'Aaron Fox is that guy. Like, I think they do need to build the team around De'Aaron Fox when it's all said and done. But De'Aaron isn't happy, I don't think. I mean, he seems like he's fatigued on the court sometimes because he has to carry the weight of the team. But the problem also, I think this is one of the big things that a lot of people don't talk about. It's the coaching. The Kings had Edelman, of course, and he was a very good coach for them. But besides that, no really success for anyone else. I think Rick Edelman was sort of the guy that kind of took them to where they needed to be at the time. And then obviously they let him go in 2006. And so I think the problem is the Kings have, coaches that don't fit the system. Now they're hiring Mike Brown, Warriors assistant. I think it's sort of Vivek Ranadive, the owner, trying to replicate the system possibly. And I don't know if it's going to work. And it probably won't, if I'm being honest. And that's being, I'm a Warriors fan, of course, so I know about how the Warriors system works like the back of my hand. And the Kings are just not the team to replicate it. And, even if I play devil's advocate here, maybe the Kings don't want to replicate what the Warriors are doing. They still have to run their system in a way that's going to win them basketball games. I feel like when you don't really have a big man for a couple years, and, Bielitsa was their center at a certain moment. And I feel like you have these guys and you want to find that right guy, but then you're also drafting guards. And don't get me wrong, Keegan Murray, he's probably going to be a great player. Davion Mitchell, probably going to be great. But the Kings aren't tanking well enough. They need to tank to get, the Chet Holmgrens. They know they're not going to make the playoffs in certain years. Last year, they weren't going to make the playoffs. And I don't think you can completely fault them. We have a draft lottery. But the Kings sort of settle sometimes for, like, an early first-round pick, but then they pick the wrong guy. And that's always why they fail. They've had so many bad draft picks. And it's not a coincidence, like I said. It's a coincidence if you have one draft bust, maybe two. But when you have 6 or 7 and you pass up on guys like Curry, Lillard, Clay, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and so many others, you got to think it's, what is the front office doing? So yeah, that's my thoughts on the Sacramento Kings. Like I said, I'm not a fan, but I do like going to games. And honestly, I like Sacramento as a city. I sort of consider the Kings my second favorite team. With that being said, I don't really follow them too closely, but I like to see them succeed. And I hope Sacramento one day can get an NBA trophy someday in the near future because their fans deserve it. They have very loyal fans, more loyal than the Warriors fans. And they sort of remind me of the A's in the sense that the ownership is pretty incompetent, turns a blind eye to the problems, and they don't really make good trades or decisions. And so, yeah, guys, let me know your thoughts on this. If you're a Kings fan or if you have any sort of affiliation with them or you're a fan, just let me know your thoughts. I'll see you guys later. And yeah, go Warriors, and I guess go Kings in this, circumstance.